Good morning to you all. I am Dr. K. Pushpam, the lead assistant professor in sociology. Today we are discussing about scientific method or scientific research. Research is a scientific endeavor. It involves scientific method. The scientific method is a systematic and step-by-step procedure following the logical and reasoning. How to define the scientific method? Robert Vance describes it as a systematic investigation to find solutions to a problem. Next author, Theodorsson has defined scientific method is building of a body of scientific knowledge through observation, experimentation, generalization and verifications. Next one is basis of scientific method. Reliance on empirical evidence, use of relevant concept, commitment to objectivity, ethical neutrality, generalization, verifiability and logical reasoning processes. The first one is reliance on evidence. So we here truth is established on the basis of evidence. Conclusion is admitted only when it is based on evidence. Scientific methods involves a systematic process. The answer to a question is not decided by intuition or imaginations. Relevant data are collected through observation or experimentation. The validity and the reliability of data are checked carefully and the data are analyzed thoroughly using appropriate method of analysis. So conclusion is reached on the basis of result of analysis. Next one is use of concept or use of relevant concepts. We experience a vast number of facts through our senses. Fact are things which actually exist. In order to deal with them, we use concept with specific meanings. Concepts are logical construct or abstractions created from sense impressions, perceptions and experiences. They are symbols representing the meaning that we hold. We use them in our thinking and communications. Otherwise, clarity and correct understanding cannot be achieved. Next one is commitment to objectivity. Objectivity is the hallmark of the scientific method. It means forming a judgment upon fact unbiased by personal impressions. According to Green, objectivity is the willingness and ability to examine evidence dispassionately. The conclusion should not vary from person to person. It should be the same for all persons. A person of science must, above all things, strive at self-eliminations in his judgment and provide an argument which is as true for each individual mind as his own. Then third one is ethical neutrality. Science does not pass normative judgment on fact. It does not say that they are good or bad. As Schrödinger says, science never imposes anything. Science aims at nothing but making true and adequate statements about its objects. Next one is generalization. Scientists are not concerned with isolated events but with a commonality of a series of events. They aim at discovering under the surface layer of diversity the threat of uniformity. Around a discovered uniformity, a logical class and its observed a pattern. A described generalization is formulated. In formulating a generalization, we should avoid the danger of committing the particularistic fallacy which arises through an inclination to generalize on insufficient or incomplete and unrelated data. This can be avoided by the accumulation of large body of data and by the employment of comparisons and control groups. Verifiability. Last one is before we discussing about verifiability, the conclusions arrived at by a scientist should be verifiable. He must make known to others how he arrived at his conclusions. He should thus expose his own methods and conclusions to critical scrutiny. When others test his conclusion under the same conditions, then it is accepted as correct. Such verification through replication may either confirm established conclusions or modify them or even invalidate them. For example, originally an atom was considered to be indivisible, but subsequent researchers have proved that is divisible and thus provided the basis for developing atomic energy. Then final one is logical reasoning process. The scientific method involves the logical process of reasoning. This reasoning process is used for drawing inference from the finding of a study or for arriving at conclusion. For example, in the survey of the expenditure pattern on basic necessaries forms a very high proportion of the total expenditure. It is concluded that lower the household income, the higher is the proportion spent on basic necessaries. The logical reasoning process consists of induction and deduction. So then what is induction? Induction is one of the methods of logical reasoning process. The inductive method consists of studying several individual cases and drawing a generalization. Therefore, induction involves two processes. One is observation and another one is generalization. So, the conclusion from induction are tentative inferences and they are subject to further confirmation based on more evidence. Then when we follow the induction method, the induction method is followed when new facts are studied, new truths are uncovered and new generalizations are formulated from a research project. For example, in a farm management study, it is proposed to test hypothesis. The application of recommended dosage of chemical fertilizers results in an increase in the yield per hectare. Next one is a sample of experimental farms and control farms is selected in an area. In the experimental farms, chemicals, fertilizers is applied and in controlled farms is not applied, but other conditions, quality of seeds, irrigations, cultural practice, etc. are the same. After the harvest, the average yield per hectare is computed for experimental and control groups and the hypothesis is tested. The inductive method of reasoning is used in the analysis. Then how we conduct the inductive method? We can use inductive method with four essential conditions. What are they? Observation must be correctly performed and recorded. Data collected should be accurate. Observation must cover representative cases drawn from a specific universe. So we are taking this stratified random sampling has to be adopted. The next one is observations must cover an adequate number of cases. Sample must be large and make representative. Then last one is the conclusion must be confined to inferences drawn from the findings. They should not be generalized to apply to types of cases not covered in the sample. The next one is in this induction method has two types. So according to Theodarson says two types of induction. One is enumerative inductions. It is the most common form of induction used in social science research. In general, this type of induction involves generalization from samples and the generalizations are usually derived through the analysis of data. Next one is analytic induction. It involves case by case analysis of specific features, Crazy outlined the step-by-step procedure of analytic inductions. Define the phenomenon to be explained. Then formulate hypothesis to explain the phenomenon. Next one is study a case to determine whether hypothesis fits in the case. So next one is if the hypothesis does not fit the fact, either reformulate the hypothesis or redefine the phenomenon so that the case is excluded. This definition must be more precise than the first one. Next one is examine a small number of cases to attain practical certainty, but whenever a negative case disproving the explanation is discovered, reformulate and the hypothesis. Reformulate the hypothesis. Next one is continue procedure of examining cases, redefining the phenomenon and reformulating the hypothesis until a universal relationship is established. For purpose of proof, examine cases outside the area, examine the cases outside area circumscribed by the definition to determine whether or not the final hypothesis applies to them. Thank you.